How are you doing? Good. So, did you enjoy the first half? Thanks. That was all me. Yeah. Okay, great stuff. We've got Conall Walsh. He's going to be fucking. He's going to be amazing. Are you excited? Yeah. You're not. You didn't say anything. Are you excited? There we go. She's excited. I'm excited. Everybody, just give a huge cheer and a round of applause for the wonderful Conall Walsh.
I'm going to savor that for a while. Thank you. Thanks for coming. No, really, wow. I didn't think I'd get the numbers. Now, a lot of amateur comedians, they'll come up here and they'll denigrate themselves for pity laughs. Try to gain your sympathy, because it's a lot easier than gaining your respect. And I am no exception. So prepare yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, for the next 45 minutes. Because what you're about to see may be the single most pathetic thing you will ever experience. You will watch this shell of a man, this being of no real substance, create such collective embarrassment in this room that you'll be forced to excuse yourselves for fear the cringing might dislocate your jaw. I have no doubt that my performance tonight will have you questioning your own life choices and how they've led you to be sitting here watching this. I can only ask that you don't lose the will to bring children into the world on my account, as the show will soon be over and you won't have to concern yourselves with me any longer. Well, now, hopefully that's had the desired effect of lowering your expectations, such that no matter how tonight goes, you at least won't be disappointed. And even if you are thoroughly unimpressed by my performance, remind yourself and take comfort that you're doing a good thing just by being here. Because tonight is for charity. Whoa, yeah. We love charity. Yeah, it's for charity. Now, perhaps you're wondering why I, callous egomaniac, decided to make tonight a charitable event. No, I'm not Jesus, but and on my birthday as well. I just noticed that there's a lot of social currency these days in appearing to care about the less fortunate. So I thought I'd take advantage of that. Now, I personally choose not to believe in the concept of less fortunate people because it makes me feel guilty and uncomfortable. So I rationalized that for all of us, life is suffering, that material wealth grants us only fleeting and shallow happiness, and that all of our lives are really just a series of highs and lows, inevitably culminating in death. So when I instinctually take pity on the gaunt junkie passed out in a puddle of his own feces, I remind myself and comfort myself knowing that that guy spends half his life high on heroin. I've never been that high in my entire life. I mean, have you ever thought about it? Heroin? It must be great. Like 100 times better than being drunk. Well, the best experience a human being can possibly have. And junkies get to enjoy that on a regular basis. And they keep a slim figure. Meanwhile, we middle-class 20-somethings are riddled with anxiety, depression, and cankles. You know, where's our charity gig? No, but seriously, there are people on the streets of this city that need our attention and money right now. And that's why after this show, I'm going to go out, and I'm going to give all the money to one junkie. No doubt he will overdose before the night is out, and begin what I have decided to call the penultimate solution. No, in all seriousness, though, We're giving the money to the Father Peter McVerry Trust because I went to a talk he did in fourth year and it was very moving. But really, I just kind of knew that making this a charity event would get asses in seats. You know, because I've been there. You know, your friend is having some event that you have to pay for, and you're like, do I really want to go to that? I mean, my friends aren't very talented. There are professional entertainers on TV. But then you think, well, you know, if I go, I'll feel a little bit better about myself. Because that's what it's all about, isn't it? Guilt. That's why we give charity. And maybe you're thinking, oh, no, I care. I shared 2 articles last week. And maybe you really are one of those brave people that regularly give up your time and money to help the less fortunate. Well, that just suggests to me that you feel more guilty than the rest of us. What dark things have you done? What dark things have you done? And I'm just going to refer to my notes now, but we'll keep the flow going. I'll just, what dark things have you done? It's about guilt. Oh, yeah, this is very important. What dark things? Because consider this. Everyone in this room has the power to be saving a child with their money and time right now. Each one of you has the power to save another human being's life right now. But instead, you know, why not buy a Fitbit or a new pair of shoes? Or how about cocaine? Yes, fund child sex trafficking whilst you pretend to give a shit. Because the truth is, you want a new pair of shoes more than you want starving children to live. And, well, I mean, yeah, you know, argue against it. And when you hear that inside you, and you know that it's true, are you being filled with a renewed sense of compassion for these poor people? No, you're being filled with guilt and shame, because it's about you. Quick, throw money at it and make impassioned speeches until it feels better. Oh, we are a sad, pathetic race of narcissistic, self-deceiving idiots. Oh, but maybe you think my blanket view of other people's charitable contributions is merely a manifestation of my own insecurities regarding how little I positively contribute to the world. And in response to that, all I can say is, let's move on. Because really more important than the charity aspect of this evening is me. The birthday boy and comedian. Damn it. Look, the flow is still going. Boy, me. Yes, indeed, if you thought tonight seemed a bit self-indulgent, you have no idea. Why, my head is so far up my own ass, it's come out the neck hole and I'm normal again. But on a more serious note, I cannot stress how important it is that tonight go well. Now, most of you know me, but for those of you who don't, my self-esteem hinges almost entirely on the perception of myself as a funny person. I have little else to offer. I'd like to take you back to my childhood now. I don't like to navel gaze. My mother's belly button is truly grotesque, but I feel like it's necessary. It was at a very early age that I realized the power of humor in forming relationships. I was a shy kid, eager to be loved. I wasn't the smartest kid in the class, wasn't very good at sports, and my hands were perpetually sticky. But some of my earliest memories are of making other people laugh and how it allowed me to form friendships and ridicule my enemies. You know, it's hard to know. It's hard to know when someone likes you. There's a lot of doubt there, a lot of uncertainty. But the beauty of someone finding you funny is that the response is immediate and instinctual. You know, laughter is difficult to fake. And sure, maybe sometimes I worry that people are just humoring me and that for 24 years everyone's just been laughing to spare my feelings. The same way I do when someone says a joke that isn't funny. And that my entire self-perception is delusional. And that I'm a talentless loser. But eventually, those feelings subside a few pints. But no, humor really is incredible in the way that it allows us to connect with strangers even, and so quickly. You know, as opposed to things like kindness or friendliness, which take an ungodly amount of time. So I suppose humor is a sort of shallow empathy, and it's all I have. But with that in mind, consider how important this is to me. My first comedy show of my life, my first full-length comedy show, and how its failure could lead me into a pit of self-doubt and depression that you, as an audience, would be collectively responsible for. So if throughout the evening you find yourself thinking things like, this isn't funny, or is that hate speech, just make a laughing sound for my sake. Need I remind you, it is my birthday. So let's all try that on the count of 3. Can we? Can we all guffaw with laughter at nothing on the count of 3? 1, 2, 3. I didn't tell you to applaud. That's not part of the laugh. Hey, can we talk about this Mohammed guy? No, we cannot. But we can ridicule Christ without the fear of death, so that's good. You know, I was walking through a cathedral in Vienna a while ago, and if you're not as middle class as I am, Vienna is the capital of Austria, and a cathedral is like a church that people pay into. But anyway, I was walking around this place, and you know, it's one of these old-timey buildings that's breathtakingly ornate. You know, every ceiling and wall is painted in immaculate detail. And every time you turn a corner, there's another golden tapestry of Christ turning bread into fish. And, you know, when you're in a place like that, you can't help but be in awe of the detail and spectacle of it. And when you consider the time it was made in, you know, these things were made when people still shat in the streets and infant mortality was the height of fashion. And I was just walking around it, and I couldn't help but think, what a massive waste of time. You know, because if Jesus wasn't the Son of God, and I have a hunch that he wasn't, well, then there's all this incredible architecture all over the world, including an entire city. And it's all been built and labored over for the sake of some 2,000-year-old huckster. I mean, because if he wasn't the Son of God, well, that's all he was. He's just some guy who, you know, he wasn't a conqueror or anything like a certain other prophet we won't mention. He was just some guy who said he was the Messiah a few millennia ago, and now there's his face on everything. I mean, it's nuts. You know, he would have taken shits. He probably had diarrhea a lot by today's standards. Imagine his balls. This man, who would be the impetus for so many of the world's most famous landmarks, had a scrotum as wrinkled as you or I. Just as unholy looking. On the subject of Christianity, though, this brings me on nicely to my next bit. Are there any child molesters in the room? You know, statistically, there probably is at least one. And that's actually true. I mean, how fucked up is that? More than likely, someone in this room is a pedophile. No, it is not me. But that's fun. You could do that with anything, with a room this size. You know, that's a fun game for statistics. Who here is cheating on their partner? Just look at whoever looks uncomfortable. Who here enjoys being fisted? Someone looks very embarrassed right now. But to speak to the pedo in the room, whoever he is, or maybe she, yes, indeed, maybe she's a trailblazer. As a young boy, I always thought there wasn't enough female representation in pedophilia. Break that glass ceiling. Break that glass cot. But to get back to the pedos, you know what the most troubling thing is about pedophiles? It's not their fault that they're pedophiles. I know. It would be easier that way, but unfortunately, just as homosexuals, bisexuals, foot fetishists, people who like getting shit on, and even those disgusting heteronormative freaks, just as all those people don't decide what attracts them, neither do pedos. Yeah. And it's easy to see these people as evil, pure evil, and of course they are, if they ever harm a child. But it's not like the rest of us are, not molesting children out of the goodness of our hearts. It's not something that crosses the mind, really. I mean, look, I'm not gonna lie to you. I'm into some pretty weird shit. Shit you wouldn't believe. Shit you probably wouldn't even comprehend as being sexual. But thank God it's not children. I mean, we all dodged a bullet there. I mean, you could literally be into any other type of person, or fucking not even a person. You could be sexually attracted to a houseplant, and by all legal means, you can have at it. People might think you're a weirdo, but they're not going to think you're pure evil. And that's how we see pedos. And we should, obviously. But here's the even more fucked up thing. There are definitely those pedos who don't act on it, right? And those men are heroes. They are both pedos and heroes. Because consider what they're doing. They are completely repressing their sexuality out of the love of other people, out of love for children. Can we get a round of applause for those pedos? I'll send that to Nambla. Applause is a strange thing, isn't it? I should have waited until you hadn't finished applauding, but let's just pretend that it. But applause is a strange thing, isn't it? You ever take a step back and think about how strange it is? Because human beings have been using and developing complex languages for thousands of years. We can describe any type of complex idea or system or emotion. And yet we still choose to show our enjoyment for things by smacking our palms together, like the common seal. I mean, but why? Sometimes it hurts. Have you ever been at a play or perhaps a less middle-class equivalent, a circus maybe? And the applause just goes on, and the performers bow about 10 fucking times, and your hands start to hurt from smacking them together. But you can't stop smacking them together. Everyone else is still smacking them together. You don't want to be rude. Keep doing this. Oh, but why? It's so loud and annoying. Wouldn't it be nicer if after a performance, the performer came out and the audience showed their appreciation by smiling up at him in silence? Maybe gave him a thumbs up if they really enjoyed it. I mean, wouldn't that be pleasant and quiet? Oh, but no. Instead, the audience feels the need to make as much noise as humanly possible in order to satisfy the performer's desperate need for loud collective approval. And I do need it. And then, of course, there are those people for whom clapping is not enough. And they feel the need to punctuate their claps with screams and whoops. Who are these whoopers? What is it inside these people that says, I can't make enough noise with my hands. I'll have to start screaming. I'm enjoying this. I mean, I don't understand it. I only scream when I'm terrified. And occasionally when I orgasm. Two things which incidentally aren't mutually exclusive. But no, I think we can progress beyond this apish clapping, because we live now in very forward-thinking and progressive times, and I personally am proud. Some parents now are raising their children without a gender, and I think that's just swell. I mean, what rational person could argue with the logic and utility of that? But is it enough? Because sure, you might curb transphobia, but I have to ask, and I don't think this is talked about constantly enough, what about Racism. Yeah. How do we solve it? How do we nip it in the bud? Isn't it obvious? Flay your children. Remove the skin at birth. And we will all become one beautiful skinless race. I know you're probably thinking to yourself, but won't we all be disgusting, gory monster people? Exactly. Say goodbye to beauty standards. That is the oppression of women and racism dealt with in one fell swoop. And it only requires the flaying of every newborn child. I will accept my award in the post. But I am proud to be living in these times. You know, we live in times now when we look out for the marginalized in society. And if I don't seem sincere in that, it's only because I'm so emotionally repressed that I'm incapable of being sincere. But I'm trying to be. But no, it's great. You know, we look out these days for the little guy. And that's why it mystifies me that we don't see more activism in support of the littlest guys, the little people. Now, I don't want to demean these people. I'm not going to use the M word. I think they are treated horrifically by society and are rarely granted the basic human respect that no person should be denied. The issue is that their appearance is inherently amusing. You know it's true. I know it's awful, but it's true. You know, an adult with child-sized proportions is just difficult for the human mind to take seriously, be that for biological or cultural reasons. And how awful for these poor individuals not to be a group that's hated, but one that's considered a joke. I mean, it's grotesque. It's dehumanizing. You know, all throughout dwarves are so in the public consciousness. It's like this whimsical fairy tale idea. These people actually exist. I mean, imagine if trolls existed. I mean, not that little people are like trolls, you know. So some of them are hot. You know, Peter Dinklage is half my height, and he's sexier than I could ever hope to be. I hope that makes it better. But I mean, you know, how terrible. These people who already face something of an uphill battle in life are portrayed in movies and TV as something to be mocked. You know, imagine if we did this with other people who have life-altering conditions. Imagine a sitcom of people who suffer from cerebral palsy that we all tune into every Saturday, have a good laugh at that. Ha ha, their lives must be difficult. Exactly, it's disgusting. It's dehumanizing. But hey, remember Mini-Me? Remember, wasn't that funny? Remember how small he was? Because that was the joke. He was small. And he was made up to look like Mike Myers, who's normal. It's gross. You know, I mean, I don't, and how do you see no activism for this? And I think that's part of the problem. Realistically, 1,000 little people walking down the street holding placards is an amusing image. I wish it weren't. I don't want to feel this way. It's just been associated in my mind. And I think what the world needs now, to get us away from this fairy tale, happy-go-lucky view of little people, what the world needs now is a wee Weinstein. Some horrific sex criminal who also happens to be a little person. Now, I don't know how a little person would go about sexually assaulting regular-sized people. Perhaps some sort of impish trickery, the tying of shoelaces or that sort of thing. Now, I'd like to give you a break from the stand-up. I'd like to break up the monotony of it. And I'm going to perform a short story. Are you all excited for that? Yeah. Hang on. Oh, shit. Fuck it. Sorry. You can keep that cheering going if you want. I'm sweating. Jesus Christ. All right, no chatter, no chatter. The show isn't over. The show isn't over yet. Stop chattering. This is the part where you got to be real quiet. Real quiet. Here we go. This is called my first sexual experience. A bead of anticipatory sweat ran down the length of my nose. My heavy inhale hoovered it brainward. I followed the thinnest hand of the classroom's clock in a full 360-degree rotation. Like clockwork, it formed the familiar right angle of 3 o'clock. And the school bell rang out. I leapt from my chair in a burst of youthful exuberance, which drew derisive eyes from my classmates, but they couldn't dampen my spirits. Oh no, my spirits were bone dry, because that night was the night. Not in the sense that it was the night time, which would apply to all nights, but in the sense that this was a night of great significance for me, which I will now elaborate on. That was the date I had double underlined and highlighted in my journal's calendar next to a detailed drawing of a swastika made of penises. It was my first teen disco, and I was prepared, as my mother would say, to chase ass. I had just turned 16 and was feeling like a big man. I'd grown 5 inches in a year, and my pubes were in full bloom. In other words, I was a chick magnet. Granted, I had never spoken to a conscious girl before, but with my testicles and vocal pitch getting lower by the day, I had been filled with the kind of manly confidence I imagined Burt Reynolds might have. My lip had 7 hairs. The disco was to take place at a popular nightclub called Calcutta, which every second month closed its doors and opened its bars to hundreds of sexually inexperienced but virile boys, eager to gain the respect of their peers by jamming a hairless finger into the orifice of a female stranger. It had become clear to me that over the past 2 years that this act of dextral penetration was exactly the social currency I needed to finally be accepted by my male classmates. These same classmates would regularly applaud at Calcutta specifically for its volume of willing finger recipients, affectionately referred to as filth. Stories of permanent wet floor signs and an overwhelming fish smell that greeted you at the door glazed me in yet another layer of confidence and had me rushing home to get ready in earnest. My mother jumped up to greet me as I opened the door. She had been waiting at the bottom stair for quite some time, judging by the indentation she left in the carpet. "Who's going to get their hole tonight?" she asked me. "Shh," she asked me with a maternal smile. "I am," I replied, trying to sound coy, though I couldn't hide the excitement in my voice. She came over and took my face in her hands. "I'm sure you'll be crawling in gash," she assured me, before planting a kiss on my salty forehead. My father had left 5 years previously, and my mother, fearing the result of my going through adolescence without a male role model, would regularly adopt a stereotyped male persona in an attempt to serve as both my mother and father. This she did out of love for me, as well as out of a visceral hatred of homosexuality. "Do you think the girls will like me?" I asked her. "Of course they will," she assured me in her motherly tone, switching then to her slightly gruffer dad voice to inform me that she had thrown a pint of lager at the television when her football team had conceded a goal, and so dinner would be delayed. I promised to emulate her masculine behavior and went upstairs to cleanse myself of the debauchery ahead. My cleaning routine was extremely thorough. I have already mentioned my sweat several times, but it really cannot be understated how excessively I would perspire, particularly when I came into contact with or thought of a woman. I once took a field trip to an art museum, and upon viewing a tapestry of the Lord Jesus Christ suckling at the tit of Our Lady, I began to sweat so uncontrollably that my shoes squelched as I slinked away to hide my erection. How I had longed in that instant to be the Lord Jesus Christ, suckling not at my mother's tit, but at the tit of a woman I was not related to, yielding not milk, but immense satisfaction. It was with dreams of tit-suckling that I stepped into the shower to wash off the day's glaze. I turned the water temperature as hot as it would go in order to fully sanitize the skin. I was able to hold back screams and maintain my balance as I writhed in pain at the water's scalding heat, motivated by the thought of my writhing fingers, which would soon be inserted into a well-lubricated meat pocket. I shampooed and conditioned until my hair achieved the consistency of fine silk. Upon exiting the shower, I opened up a new can of Lynx Africa, which I figured would make me seem exotic to women. I sprayed the entire contents of the can on my body, focusing largely on the erogenous zones, including the anus, as you can never be too careful. After a vigorous self-sniffing, I was satisfied and went to my room smelling like a well-to-do African king. I had laid out the evening's outfit on the bed that morning, each article specifically selected for maximum sex appeal. And so I was horrified to re-enter my room and find my jeans missing from the ensemble. Panic overcame me, and the power of my antiperspirant panic overcame the power of my antiperspirant, and sweat began to ooze. As I upturned every surface and disemboweled every drawer in my room, but nowhere could I find the skinny jeans that were my one-way ticket to Pussy Town. I collapsed on the floor, still nude, feeling as though I'd boarded a no-return train to Despair Town with a stop-off in This Is Shit Village. So dejected was I that I allowed my mother to shout my name 3 times before I responded with a courteous, "What?" "I made your favorite," came her maternal cry up the stairs. "Bangers and mash." She said it as I thought it, but neither bangers nor mash could be any solace in my pantsless state. Solemnly, I put on a t-shirt and underwear to hide my shame being the name I had given to my flaccid penis. Entering the kitchen, I felt incapable of returning my mother's wide smile, and was compelled to stare at the ground as she plated my mash. It was on the ground, however, that I caught sight of the jeans pant leg, protruding limply from the washing machine door like the body of a car crash victim. "You washed my jeans," I said with joyous surprise, which masked my burgeoning contempt. "Of course I did, honey. They smelt of ejaculate." She had barely finished responding before my feet were in the jeans, and I was pulling them up with renewed confidence. This proved something of a Herculean task, if Hercules had worn pants. As the already skinny jeans had shrunk in the wash, and getting my thighs into them was like trying to fist a rodent. But with persistence and my aptitude for wriggling, I managed to conquer them. And with a mighty effort, I buttoned the fly. However, this presented a new problem. As the jeans hugged my skin so tightly, the bulge of my shame was unmistakably visible. Though to call it a bulge would have been charitable. It was more like a lump that's unimpressive size could easily be the undoing of all my plans. Acting fast, I grabbed one of the girthier sausages my mother had doled out, and while she was distracted, jammed it down my pants and carefully maneuvered it into the desirable position. Now boasting a mighty bulge, I shoveled down my dinner so fast that I had to retch several times. It would not be the last retching of the night. Washed, dressed, and fed, I ushered my mother towards her own car, and we set off for Calcutta. Along the way, I insisted on playing the 1992 dance pop hit, "I'm Too Sexy," on repeat and at full volume. I like the song, as when I sing along to it, it instills in me a sense that I myself am too sexy. This is done through something called empathy. 5 minutes from 5 minutes from our destination, my mother pulled into a side street and came to a stop. She then produced 6 cans of premium lager from her glove box. She placed them on my lap. I turned to her, and she stared at me, unspeaking. Her eyes cold and menacing, they communicated meaning that words could not. I drank all 6 cans over the course of the next half hour, all while my mother said nothing, only stared, and occasionally tilted her head as a means of encouraging me. The warm, bitter lager coursed through my adolescent body, and even as I opened the door to vomit after my 5th can, I felt a confidence that I had never felt before. The beer had worked. My mother recognized this, and we drove on. Upon the arrival at the gates of Calcutta, I staggered out of the car. My mother made some lurid sexual comment before driving off, but it proved unintelligible to me. A monotonous beat emanated from the club's interior as I stood in line, swaying slightly. Standing there, I was reminded of my trip to Disneyland when I had been hoisted on my father's powerful shoulders in long lines, waiting to meet my favorite Disney characters. However, this time I was not hoping to curry favor with Buzz Lightyear, but was instead waiting in line for the purposes of fingoral penetration. I was flanked and preceded by the bronze bodies of teenage girls, whose immodest outfits left little to the imagination, though still covered the best parts, those being the breasts and sex organs, which I imagined accordingly. I was let in with little protest and made my way directly to the dance floor. Once in its center, I began to dance. Each of my limbs took on a mind of their own and flailed and twisted erratically. Staring to the ceiling, I screamed loudly over the music to show my enthusiasm. This drew attention towards me, as I was the only person on the dance floor at the time. This was the precise reaction, however, that I had desired. And once I was satisfied that enough people had seen me, I left the dance floor and took a seat on a bar stool. It wasn't long before I saw her, stumbling towards me. She was average height and unattractive, her makeup poorly applied and her guts spilled over her waistband like a pie crust. In other words, she was perfect. She started making noise before she spoke, as drunk people often do. "You're funny," she slurred. I'm uncomfortable with compliments, so I simply answered, "Yes." It was then that the kissing began. Suddenly, her lips were on mine, or rather over mine. Her tongue shot in and out of my mouth like a dog lapping milk, only she was lapping my saliva and was a human being. Needless to say, this thoroughly aroused me, but as it continued, the pressure mounted. When ought I to begin the fingering? I couldn't ask her. My mouth was being used. I slowly moved my hand down the length of her body, softly brushing at her breast as I passed, in a way that could be interpreted as accidental. Finally, my hand arrived at the danger zone, but it was impeded by a belt that was under such pressure. My fingers fumbled with the buckle, but they were like useless, fleshy keys. I grimaced at my predicament, and she pulled back. "What, do you not like it?" she asked. "You're really big." I was about to correct her until I realized that my penis, though erect, had been noticeably untouched. I then came to a horrible realization. Looking down at her hand, confirmed that she was indeed stroking the pork sausage that bulged from my tight jeans. She saw me looking at her hand and leaned into my ear. "How about if I do this?" she squeezed. Her screams rang out in my ear, and the music was stopped. What she had thought was my penis had broken into a meaty pulp in her hands. She backed away slowly, shaking, pale as snow. "I have another one." I explained. She ran away in tears, taking my hopes and my dreams with her. Whew. It's only semi-autobiographical. Emphasis on the semi. Yeah. But on the subject of sex, have you ever worried that maybe you're too... have you ever worried that maybe you're too insecure to have sex properly? I mean, you know, I've had sex, right? And it was good. You know, I enjoyed it. But I'm always very aware that I'm having sex. You know, I mean, obviously I'm aware to some extent, otherwise that would be, you know. But I mean that I'm very self-aware. I'm very, you know, I'm just thinking in the moment. I'm like, I'm having sex. You know, I think it's how I treated it throughout my adolescence. We built up sex as like the be-all and end-all thing. It's what we all wanted. And now that it actually happens to me on a reasonably regular basis, you know, as reasonable as I'd like. But now that it happens to me, you know, I feel like I'm still in my teenage mindset and I can't get over it and I can't believe it's happening. Sometimes I like to bend back slightly and actually look at the penetration. And, you know, and I just think, you know, look at that. Yeah, and that's something. You know, that's part of me and it's in part of her. What's she doing putting that in her mouth? I'd piss out of there. You know, I mean, because out of context, sex is kind of disgusting. You know, it's weird. We all act so prim and proper outside, you know, in society. Oh, hello, thank you very much. But then you get into bed with someone and suddenly it's all blah, blah, you know. I mean, maybe that's just me. I don't know what your technique is. And then genitals. Genitals are gross looking. You know, maybe that sounds weird, but just consider the specific combination of hairs, wrinkles, veins, and spots. It's really singular to genitals, at least at this age. And, you know, I can't think of a less aesthetically pleasing part of the human body than genitals. Now, don't get me wrong, fellas. I love pussy, but... I love it more in a conceptual sense. You know, I mean, you wouldn't call a vagina pretty, you know. It's not pretty like a girl's face is pretty. There's too many moving parts. I remember when I was a kid, I used to think that a vagina was just like a perfectly circular hole in between a girl's legs. And then when I finally got down there, whoa, it was so much more complex. It was like going from word searches to crosswords. And that's to say nothing about how disgusting penises look. I mean, there really is no sadder image than that of the flaccid penis. And yet these are the parts that we're supposed to want to fuck. Now, we make do, you know. Obviously, we're not too put off by it, but well, wouldn't it be nicer if when someone spread their legs, they just had a more attractive version of their face in between them? I wasn't able to. There's not enough room here for me to spread my legs. It's a visual one. You know, I am at this point in my life 23, 24. 20. Birthday boy. Yeah. It doesn't require clapping. I am at this point in my life a 24-year-old little boy. Despite this, I'm often mistaken for an adult. And this mistake even extends to the legal definition of what an adult is. But from my own and others' subjective assessment, I am merely a large, bearded child with a furrowed brow and a prematurely sagging scrotum. I always thought that I'd be an adult by the time I was in my 20s, and yet here I stand, still so reliant on my parents. It's as though I never stopped suckling at their parental teat. Both of their teats. My father was a large man. Granted, with him, it's a fruitless endeavor, but it's good for the gums. However, at this stage, even mother's milk is growing sour. Pretty soon, it's going to dry up, It's getting pussy. Not like vagina, but pus-filled. And in this strange... Everyone always says, like, everything is disgusting, but pus, for some reason, is like the most disgusting thing. It's like... I don't know. That's enough about pus. I'll write some material about pus. But in that strange breastfeeding metaphor, that pus represents shame. Because every year that I continue to allow my parents to feed me, shelter me, and occasionally bathe me, another layer of that pussy shame builds up in my mouth. And pretty soon I'm going to have to spit it out. And I've been thinking, yeah, Lee, get a load of this. I do this bit all the time. I'm surprised you've never seen it before. I'm a bit disappointed about it. And where was I? Mother's milk is sour. Yes, I've been thinking about this a lot lately. Because the other day, my dad sat me down. And he said, son, if you're going to keep living in my house, he said, you're going to have to start paying rent. He said, I know house prices in Dublin are crazy these days. And you feel like you'd never be able to afford a place of your own. But if you get into the habit of paying rent now, it'll put you in the right mindset to one day pay a mortgage. And you know, it was in that moment, as I stared into his tired, haggard old face, that I realized the greatest gift a parent can ever give their child is their house when they die. Now, I'm not saying I wish for the death of my parents. I've known them a long time. They seem like very reasonable people. I wish them long and fruitful lives. But, you're never going to get anything better than a house. One of my biggest anxieties about becoming an adult is not being able to afford a place to live. Well, my parents' death would completely alleviate that concern. And if it didn't happen to coincide with my birthday or Christmas, well, that would be 3 presents in 1 year. Maybe there's not as much pressure to succeed these days. And I think certainly standards of human achievement are on the decline. And I think nothing illustrates this better than my mouth is so fucking dry. Nothing illustrates better the decline in the standard of human achievement better than the Guinness Book of World Records. Now, I like the Guinness Book of World Records. It's certainly a lot more optimistic than the Smithwick's Book of Global Failure. But it's great. It's a great thing. It's a great idea to document the pinnacles of human achievement and the firsts. The fastest man who's ever lived. The first person on the moon. The tallest skyscraper. Real, incredible feats of human achievement that you can't help but be impressed by. But it's an annual book. And they can't release the same thing every year. So over the decades, they've sort of broadened their scope of what records are worthy of being documented. Have you read it lately? Most snails held on face. Longest line of hot dogs. And the largest congregation of people dressed as Smurfs. I mean, if not for the Guinness Book of World Records celebrating these meaningless achievements, who would even be attempting these activities? For what other reason would you put snails on your face or line up hot dogs? I mean, why don't we just give a world record to the guy who could eat the most dog shit in an hour? I mean, that would be more impressive than lining up hot dogs. I'd actually like to see that. I'd go. I was... I was watching a show on, you can't just laugh at my, idiosyncrasies. Not everyone knows me as well. I was watching a show on Sky One. You remember Sky One had a, remember Sky One? This is a staple of my childhood. Remember Sky One had a world record show, right? When people come on and they compete for world records. Do you remember this? There you go. And there was a guy on that, and he was trying to open the most amount of beer bottles with his mouth in a minute. A noble ambition. And the buzzer starts, and this guy starts chomping into beer bottles like it's the end of Prohibition. And almost immediately, his gums begin to bleed excessively. Have you ever cut your lip or gums? It's extremely painful. This guy didn't flinch. which suggested to me that he knew this was going to happen. And so had presumably been practicing and regularly mutilating his gums for this. You know, I was just like, is he going to feel accomplished after this? Is all that painful practice going to be worth getting his picture in a book read primarily by 10-year-old boys? And then, of course, there's the world's fattest man. I mean, are we celebrating that guy's terminal obesity? Because if he were just a few pounds lighter, he'd just be an inconceivably obese person. And if that were the case, no one would be encouraging him to gain weight. But he is not just a fat man. He is the world's fattest man. He's a hero. He's the Usain Bolt of being fat. But like, is he proud of that title? Does he like being the world's fattest man? Is he a bit afraid to lose a few pounds? Maybe I'm nothing now, you know, at least for a while. But when they, you know, do they give him words of encouragement when they raise his 200-pound immobile arm in order to shake the hand of the records commissioner? Does the guy smile at him? Does he say, like, hey, you know, keep it up. Keep eating, you freak. See you next year for the big spread, yeah? Hopefully. It's gross. But no, I'm just being silly. The whole thing is, I mean, it's all comedy, isn't it? But no, I don't know. Stop. I'd like to be serious for one moment. I'd like to talk about something that is dear to my heart. Now, you probably know this, but my respect for women is unparalleled, unprecedented, and a third adjective. And in an attempt to understand their plight and their struggle, I've written a poem that I'd like to close this evening with. Now, would you like to hear the poem? Great. Whew, thank God. No, I'll just go there. No, serious again, please. This is called If I Bled. I live the male and carefree life. I face no obstacles, oppression, nor strife. This unjust truth I must confront, for women suffer every month. How I long to bear your cramps. Tampons stick to the walls like gory stamps. If only I could one day wallow in your despair. A brief period of rectal bleeding cannot compare. Let me wake up to blood on my thighs, that I might one day empathize, or perhaps even synchronize. I am a man. You're right to hate me. Take this scalpel, please castrate me, and stretch my scrotum over a drum, and beat it at every women's march to come. For women are the unfairer sex, at least in terms of their paychecks. But my boss is a woman, and we have good rapport. In a professional way, I would never touch her. I'm sorry for Hitler, Stalin, and Weinstein. And as for Luther, Gandhi, and Einstein, well, sure, they were inspiring, courageous, and wise. But in truth, I believe they were women in disguise. So, let us use words like Hugh Woman, Nelson Womandela, and Vince McWoman, that we might one day know the painful sensation of a heavy bout of prolonged menstruation. Thank you very much, everybody. I'll wait till you're all up, yeah.